Awakening the Sleeping Self, A Journey to Conscious Living. Introduction, The Veil of Sleep. Most of us live behind a veil, seeing the world not as it is, but as we are. This veil, woven from our upbringing, cultural conditioning, personal traumas, and inherited beliefs, colors every experience, judgment, and reaction. We believe ourselves to be awake, yet we navigate life in a form of waking sleep, responding to the world through the filter of our subconscious programming rather than with true awareness. Our subconscious mind forms the foundation of our perceptions, storing the accumulated experiences, lessons, and beliefs that shape how we interpret reality. It operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, guiding our reactions, preferences, biases, and behaviors without our explicit permission. While this subconscious programming serves the vital function of helping us navigate a complex world without overwhelming our conscious mind with every detail, it also creates a profound limitation. We become prisoners of our past conditioning, seeing the world not through clear eyes but through the accumulated filters of our history. This narrative explores the journey of awakening, of recognizing the veil that separates us from direct experience, of questioning the inherited truths that shape our reality, and of embarking on the challenging but liberating path toward greater consciousness. It examines what it means to wake up, the catalysts that spark awakening, the practices that sustain it, and the compassion required to navigate a world where many still sleep. Part 1. The Nature of Sleep. The Conditioning of Perception. From our earliest moments, we begin constructing a model of reality based on our experiences. A child who receives consistent love and care may develop a subconscious belief that the world is fundamentally safe and people are trustworthy. Another who experiences neglect or abuse might form the opposite conclusion. Neither child consciously chooses these beliefs. They emerge naturally from experience and become the foundation for how each perceives and engages with the world. As we grow, this conditioning expands and solidifies. Family dynamics teach us about relationships and our place within them. Educational systems shape our understanding of success, intelligence, and worth. Cultural narratives instill values about what constitutes a good life. Media influences establish norms about appearance, status, and happiness. Religious or philosophical traditions provide frameworks for meaning and morality. The result is a complex web of beliefs, assumptions, and interpretations that operate largely outside our awareness. We don't choose to see the world through these filters. We simply do, unaware that we're looking through colored lenses rather than with naked eyes. This conditioning isn't inherently negative. It serves the essential function of helping us organize an otherwise overwhelming influx of sensory information and navigate complex social systems. Without some form of filtering and interpretation, we would be paralyzed by the sheer volume of raw data our senses receive each moment. The problem arises not from having perspectives, but from mistaking our perspectives for objective truth, from forgetting that we're looking through a lens at all. When we confuse our filtered perception with reality itself, we become incapable of considering alternative viewpoints or questioning the limitations of our understanding. We react to situations automatically, following the scripts encoded in our subconscious, often perpetuating patterns that no longer serve us or others. The illusion of separation. Perhaps the most profound aspect of our sleep state is the illusion of separation, the deep-seated belief that we exist as discrete, independent entities, disconnected from the whole of existence. This sense of separation manifests in countless ways. Us versus them thinking, the prioritization of individual desires over collective well-being, and the persistent feeling of isolation that haunts modern life. This illusion ripples through every aspect of human experience. It underlies our competitive economic systems, our tribalistically divided societies, and our exploitative relationship with the natural world. At the personal level, it generates a constant sense of lack, a feeling that something is missing, that we are incomplete beings who must acquire, achieve, or become something more to be whole. The irony is that this sense of separation is itself a product of our conditioned perception rather than an accurate reflection of reality. Modern physics has demonstrated the profound interconnectedness of all phenomena, revealing a universe of relationships rather than isolated entities. Ecological science shows us that all living systems exist in complex webs of interdependence. Even our bodies, which we experience as separate and contained, constantly exchange matter and energy with the environment, with trillions of microorganisms living within us as essential partners in our physical existence. Yet despite this evidence, the subjective experience of separation persists because it's encoded in our subconscious programming, reinforced by language that divides the world into subjects and objects, and perpetuated by social systems that reward individualistic thinking. This fundamental misperception forms the bedrock of our sleeping state, informing virtually every aspect of how we see ourselves and our relationship to the world. The identification with thought. Another key aspect of our sleep state is our complete identification with the thinking mind. Most humans equate themselves with their thoughts, believing, "I am my thoughts," rather than recognizing thoughts as temporal phenomena arising within consciousness. This identification creates a prison of conceptual thinking, where we relate to life through mental constructs rather than direct experience. The thinking mind excels at categorization, analysis, and problem-solving, but it also generates a constant stream of judgments, comparisons, and narratives that distort our perception of reality. When we're identified with thought, we don't experience the world directly. We experience our thoughts about the world, a crucial distinction that separates the sleeping from the awakening consciousness. This identification with thought creates a perpetual state of psychological time, where we're rarely fully present with what is. Instead, we're lost in regrets or nostalgia about the past or anxieties and fantasies about the future. The present moment, the only moment that ever actually exists, slips through our fingers as we remain entranced by the mind's narratives about what was or what might be. The sleep of identification with thought also manifests as the voice in the head that maintains a running commentary on our experience, constantly judging, comparing, criticizing, and narrating. This inner dialogue creates a sense of duality, a me that is separate from my experience, a thinker separate from thoughts, an observer separate from the observed. This internal splitting reinforces the illusion of separation and keeps us trapped in conceptual rather than direct knowing. Part 2. The Catalysts of Awakening. What compels a sleeping person to begin the journey of awakening? What cracks the shell of conditioning and creates an opening for greater consciousness? While each person's path is unique, several common catalysts tend to initiate the awakening process. The catalyst of suffering. Perhaps the most common catalyst for awakening is suffering. When our carefully constructed model of reality fails to deliver the happiness, security, or meaning it promised, we may begin questioning its validity. This suffering takes many forms. The disillusionment that follows achieving long-sought goals, only to find they don't bring the fulfillment we expected. The collapse of relationships or identities on which we've built our sense of self. The existential crises triggered by confronting mortality, whether through personal illness, the death of loved ones, or collective threats like climate change or pandemic. The persistent anxiety, depression, or emptiness that signals a life out of alignment with deeper values. Suffering creates a crucial opening because it disrupts the automatic functioning of our conditioned patterns. When our usual strategies for finding security and happiness fail repeatedly, we may finally pause long enough to question the underlying assumptions that guide our choices. As the Buddha recognized 2,500 years ago, suffering can be the doorway to liberation when it motivates us to seek a more authentic relationship with reality. The catalyst of grace. While suffering often initiates awakening through disruption, some experience awakening through what might be called grace, unexpected moments of clarity, connection, or transcendence that reveal a reality beyond our conditioned perception. These moments might occur in nature, where the magnificence of a landscape temporarily silences the chattering mind, allowing for direct experience of beauty and interconnection. They might arise in the presence of an awakened teacher whose words or mere presence catalyzes a shift in perception. They can emerge through creative expression, where the surrender to artistic flow creates a temporary suspension of the separate self. They sometimes occur spontaneously, as in peak experiences where the boundaries of the self seem to dissolve, revealing a deeper unity with all existence. Whether through suffering or grace, these catalysts create a crucial crack in what spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, the accumulated emotional wounding and conditioning that maintains our sleep state. This crack allows a ray of consciousness to penetrate the otherwise automatic functioning of the subconscious mind, initiating the possibility of a different way of being. The catalyst of knowledge. For some, awakening begins through exposure to knowledge that challenges their existing worldview. This might come through encountering spiritual or philosophical traditions that offer maps of consciousness and methods for transcending limited perception, studying scientific fields like quantum physics, neuroscience, or ecology that reveal the limitations of conventional materialistic views of reality, exploring psychological approaches like Jungian analysis, which illuminates the shadow aspects of the psyche and the projections that distort our perception of others. Reading accounts of those who have walked the path of awakening and recognizing one's own experience reflected in their words. This intellectual engagement can serve as an important preliminary step, providing conceptual frameworks that help us make sense of our experience and offering practices that support the journey from theory to lived realization. Part 3. The nature of truth and reality. As we begin questioning our conditioned perceptions, we inevitably confront fundamental questions about the nature of truth and reality. What is really real beyond our subjective filters? Is there an objective truth to be discovered, or is all knowing inherently perspectival? The limitations of conceptual truth. The first recognition on the awakening journey is that conceptual knowledge, truth articulated through language and thought, always falls short of direct experience. As Alan Watts famously observed, the menu is not the meal. No matter how accurate or sophisticated our descriptions of reality, they remain abstractions, representations, rather than the thing itself. This limitation doesn't mean conceptual knowledge has no value. It's an essential tool for navigating the relative world and communicating our experience. But mistaking the map for the territory creates a fundamental distortion. The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon, and confusing intellectual understanding with direct realization keeps us trapped in the realm of concepts rather than awake to the living reality they attempt to describe. The levels of truth. As awareness deepens, we begin to recognize that truth operates at multiple levels simultaneously. Conventional truth, the practical, everyday level of truth that allows us to function in the relative world. At this level, distinctions and categories are useful and necessary. The statement, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius at standard pressure, is conventionally true and practically useful, even if a physicist might point out complexities and exceptions. Scientific truth, the systematic observation of phenomena that yields increasingly accurate models of how the material world functions. Scientific truth is provisional, always open to refinement through better data or more comprehensive theories, yet it provides reliable maps for understanding physical reality. Psychological truth. The recognition of patterns in human consciousness, including the subconscious drivers of behavior, the projections that distort perception, and the narratives that shape identity. This level of truth helps us understand the internal landscape of mind and emotion. Mystical truth, the direct, non-conceptual knowing that arises when the separate self temporarily dissolves, revealing a fundamental unity or interconnectedness beyond subject-object duality. This level of truth is experiential rather than intellectual, and often feels more real than ordinary perception when experienced. The awakening journey involves recognizing that these levels aren't contradictory, but complementary, each offering a valid perspective within its proper domain. The mature awakening is not about rejecting conventional or scientific truth in favor of mystical insight, but about developing the wisdom to navigate between these levels appropriately according to context. Reality beyond concepts. What then is the real world that awakening reveals? Perhaps paradoxically, the deepest reality may be that which cannot be fully captured in concepts or language. Various traditions point toward this non-conceptual reality. Buddhist teachings on emptiness, shunyata, point to the inherent openness and ungraspability of phenomena, where nothing exists independently or permanently, but rather arises interdependently in constant flux. Taoist references to the Tao that cannot be told gesture toward a reality that transcends the dualistic categories of language. Advaita Vedanta's non-dual awareness, Advaita means not two, indicates a consciousness that precedes the separation into subject and object. Mystical traditions across cultures describe a ground of being or divine reality that transcends yet includes all manifest phenomena. What these diverse pointers share is the recognition that the deepest reality cannot be fully conceptualized, but must be directly experienced. And this direct experience reveals something profoundly different from our ordinary perception. A reality characterized by wholeness rather than fragmentation, interconnection rather than separation, dynamic process rather than static entities. Part 4. The process of awakening. Awakening is rarely a single event, but rather an unfolding process with distinct phases and challenges. While each person's journey is unique, certain patterns tend to emerge as consciousness expands beyond its conditioned limitations. Questioning and disillusionment. The first phase often involves questioning previously unexamined assumptions and growing disillusioned with conventional narratives about success, happiness, and meaning. During this phase, there's a recognition that something is fundamentally unsatisfying about the life one has been living, even if one has achieved the goals society deems valuable. This questioning might be directed toward social norms and expectations that no longer feel authentic or meaningful, religious dogmas that seem to constrain rather than liberate consciousness, material pursuits that fail to provide lasting fulfillment, relationships built on mutual unconsciousness rather than genuine connection, career paths chosen for security or status rather than purpose or joy. This phase can be intensely uncomfortable as the familiar guideposts of identity and meaning begin to dissolve before new ones have formed. Many people experience what mystics have called the dark night of the soul, a period of profound disorientation and emptiness as old structures crumble. Glimpses and practice. As questioning deepens, most seekers begin having glimpses of a different way of being, moments of clarity, presence, or expanded awareness that stand in stark contrast to their habitual state of consciousness. These glimpses might come through meditation or contemplative practices that temporarily quiet the thinking mind, encounters with nature that evoke a sense of connection beyond the separate self, creative flow states where self-consciousness dissolves into pure doing, spontaneous moments of presence catalyzed by beauty, love, or even crisis. These glimpses, however brief, provide crucial evidence that another way of perceiving and being is possible. They become reference points that motivate the consistent practice necessary for sustainable awakening. This leads to the adoption of practices that support the awakening process, not as ends in themselves, but as technologies for disrupting habitual patterns and cultivating greater awareness. These practices might include formal meditation to develop witnessing awareness of thoughts and emotions, body-centered practices like yoga, qigong, or conscious dance that ground awareness in direct somatic experience, self-inquiry that questions the nature of identity and the assumptions underlying perception, shadow work that illuminates and integrates disowned aspects of the psyche, ethical commitments that align behavior with emerging awareness, service that expresses and reinforces the recognition of interconnection. Through consistent practice, glimpses of awakened consciousness become more frequent and sustained, gradually rewiring neural pathways and creating new default states of awareness. Integration and embodiment. Perhaps the most challenging phase is the integration of awakened awareness into everyday life. Many spiritual seekers experience profound openings in retreat settings or peak experiences, only to find themselves reverting to habitual patterns when facing the stresses and triggers of ordinary existence. True awakening isn't about escaping the relative world, but about bringing presence, compassion, and wisdom into every dimension of human experience. This integration involves recognizing and working with emotional patterns that persist despite intellectual understanding, bringing mindfulness to relationships, particularly triggering interactions that activate old conditioning, applying awareness to work and creative expression, infusing everyday activities with presence, navigating social systems designed for sleeping consciousness while maintaining awakened perspective, allowing awakening to inform ethical choices, political engagement, and participation in collective life. This phase often reveals the cyclical rather than linear nature of awakening. We don't simply wake up once and for all, but rather spiral through deeper levels of realization and integration, continually discovering new areas of unconsciousness even as our baseline awareness expands. Compassion for those still sleeping. A critical marker of genuine awakening is the development of compassion for those still identified with conditioned patterns. Rather than feeling superior to the unawakened masses, the truly awakening heart recognizes that everyone is doing the best they can given their level of consciousness and conditioning. We ourselves continue to operate from unconsciousness in many areas despite our progress. Judgment and spiritual pride represent subtle forms of ego that actually obstruct deeper awakening. Our own liberation is inseparable from the well-being of all beings. This compassion manifests as patience with those who don't share our perspective, skillful communication that meets others where they are, rather than imposing our understanding, and commitment to creating conditions that support collective awakening, rather than merely pursuing individual enlightenment. Part 5. Practical approaches to awakening. While awakening cannot be forced or manufactured, certain approaches consistently support the natural unfolding of consciousness beyond its conditioned limitations. Cultivating present moment awareness. At the heart of awakening is the practice of bringing attention fully into the present moment, the only place where life actually happens and where conditioned patterns can be recognized and released. This cultivation involves regular formal meditation that develops the capacity to observe thoughts and emotions without identification, informal mindfulness practices that bring awareness to everyday activities like eating, walking, or listening, the habit of pausing throughout the day to check in with bodily sensations, emotional states, and thought patterns. Intentional engagement with sensory experience, truly seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling rather than conceptualizing experience. Through this consistent return to present moment awareness, we gradually weaken the grip of past conditioning and future projection that characterize the sleep state. Practicing self-inquiry. Complementing present moment awareness is the practice of self-inquiry, the disciplined questioning of our most fundamental assumptions about identity and reality. This inquiry takes many forms. The direct question, "Who am I?" pursued not for conceptual answers, but to trace awareness back to its source. Investigation of the beliefs underlying emotional reactions. What am I assuming to be true in this moment? Examination of the sense of self. Where exactly is this I that seems so solid and separate? Questioning perceptions. How do I know this is true? What else might be happening here? Effective self-inquiry doesn't seek intellectual answers, but rather creates openings in our habitual way of seeing, allowing fresh perception to emerge from beyond conceptual mind. Working with triggers and shadows. Some of the most powerful opportunities for awakening come through our triggers, those situations and interactions that activate strong emotional reactions based on past conditioning. Rather than avoiding triggers, the awakening perspective views them as precise indicators of where unconscious patterns still operate. Working skillfully with triggers involves developing the capacity to pause before reacting automatically, investigating the bodily sensations, emotions, and thoughts that arise when triggered, identifying the core beliefs and unmet needs driving the reaction, bringing compassion to the wounded aspects of self that emerge in these moments, choosing conscious responses rather than unconscious reactions. Similarly, shadow work, engaging with the disowned or rejected aspects of ourselves, provides a crucial path to greater wholeness. By recognizing and integrating what we've pushed into unconsciousness, we expand our capacity for authenticity and compassion. Learning from teachers and traditions. While awakening is ultimately a direct personal realization beyond concepts, the guidance of teachers and wisdom traditions can provide invaluable support along the way. Those who have traversed the territory of awakening can point out blind spots we're unable to see ourselves, offer practices and perspectives that address our specific patterns of unconsciousness, embody the possibility of awakened living, inspiring our own journey, create fields of awareness that temporarily lift us beyond our habitual state, provide community and context for integrating transformative experiences. The wise engagement with teachers and traditions involves neither uncritical surrender nor dismissive skepticism, but rather a balanced discernment that values wisdom while maintaining autonomy. Engaging in conscious relationship. Few domains offer richer opportunities for awakening than our close relationships. The intimacy of partnership, family, friendship, and community constantly brings our conditioning into the light, revealing where we're still operating from unconscious patterns. Approaching relationships as opportunities for awakening involves recognizing others as mirrors that reflect both our awakened nature and our blind spots, taking responsibility for our projections rather than blaming others for our reactions, practicing authentic communication that expresses truth without judgment, developing curiosity about differences in perception that reveals the limitations of our own view, extending compassion to the wounded, unconscious aspects of both self and other, creating agreements and boundaries that honor both personal truth and mutual well-being. Through this conscious approach to relationship, we discover that connection with others provides both the greatest challenges and the most profound opportunities for awakening. Part 6. Living from Awakened Awareness. As awakening deepens, certain qualities naturally emerge that characterize the shift from conditioned to conscious living, from reactivity to response. Perhaps the most noticeable shift occurs in how we engage with challenging situations. Rather than reacting automatically from conditioned patterns, we develop the capacity to create space between stimulus and response, consider multiple perspectives before drawing conclusions, access wisdom beyond habitual thinking, respond in ways aligned with our deepest values rather than immediate impulses. Act from centered presence even amidst turbulence. This shift from reactivity to response transforms our engagement with everything from minor irritations to major life challenges. From judgment to discernment. The awakening journey involves a crucial distinction between judgment and discernment. While the sleeping mind constantly evaluates experience as good or bad based on egoic preferences, awakened awareness develops the capacity for clear seeing without the overlay of personal likes and dislikes. This shift manifests as the ability to recognize what's happening without automatically categorizing it as positive or negative, openness to the wisdom that may be present in seemingly negative experiences, evaluation based on deeper values rather than surface preferences, compassion toward self and others even when behavior falls short of ideals, recognition of the wholeness that includes and transcends apparent opposites. This non-judgmental awareness doesn't mean lacking discrimination or ethical clarity. Rather, it allows for more precise and compassionate discernment freed from the distortions of ego-centered judgment. From separation to connection. Perhaps the most profound shift in awakening is the movement from experiencing oneself as a separate entity to recognizing the fundamental interconnectedness of all life. This shift transforms how we relate to other humans, seeing beyond surface differences to our shared consciousness. Our relationship with the natural world, experiencing ourselves as part of, rather than apart from nature. How we approach seemingly divisive issues, seeking understanding across differences, rather than reinforcing separation. Our sense of purpose, moving from individual achievement toward contribution to collective well-being. Our relationship with suffering, developing compassion that recognizes others, pain as inseparable from our own road. This recognition of interconnection doesn't erase the relative reality of individual existence, but contextualizes it within a larger wholeness, allowing for a more balanced expression of both uniqueness and unity. From fixed identity to fluid being. The awakening journey reveals the constructed nature of what we've taken to be a solid, permanent self. Rather than maintaining a rigid identity built from past conditioning, we develop the capacity for holding identities lightly as functional rather than fundamental aspects of being, allowing for evolution and growth rather than defending fixed self-concepts, experiencing the spaciousness of awareness that contains but isn't limited to personal identity, engaging playfully rather than seriously with the various roles we embody. Finding security in being itself rather than in particular ways of being. This fluidity doesn't mean lacking integrity or consistency, but rather expressing authentic presence, freed from the limitations of rigid self-definition. Conclusion: the ongoing journey. The journey of awakening has no final destination. Even the most profound realizations continue to deepen and integrate throughout a lifetime, revealing new dimensions of consciousness and new areas of unconsciousness to be illuminated. This ongoing nature of awakening brings both humility and hope. Humility arises from recognizing how much remains unconscious despite our progress. Hope emerges from experiencing the tangible shifts that occur when even small areas of conditioning come into the light of awareness. Rather than striving for some idealized state of perfect enlightenment, the mature approach to awakening involves commitment to the process itself, to showing up with presence, compassion, and curiosity for each moment's invitation to see more clearly and love more fully. In this commitment, we discover that awakening isn't ultimately about escaping the human condition, but about embracing it with greater consciousness. We find that the very challenges that once seemed obstacles to our happiness, the messiness of emotions, the complexity of relationships, the limitations of physical existence, become the precise path through which wisdom and compassion can flourish. And perhaps most importantly, we recognize that individual awakening, while precious, is incomplete without extending toward collective transformation. In a world facing unprecedented challenges, from ecological destruction to social polarization to technological disruption, the expansion of consciousness beyond its conditioned limitations may be not just a personal aspiration, but a collective imperative. Each person who commits to this journey of awakening contributes to the larger field of consciousness, creating ripples that extend far beyond individual experience. Through presence, compassion, and conscious action, the awakening heart participates in the evolution of consciousness itself, an evolution upon which the future of human and more than human flourishing may well depend. The invitation is always present in each moment, to wake up from the trance of conditioned perception, to see with fresh eyes the wonder and possibility of existence, and to participate consciously in the unfolding mystery of life.